The story is built as a closed circle. Every day resembles the previous one. Every dawn brings the same struggle for survival: meager earnings, cold, hunger, illness, and humiliation. Through this story, you will see what it's like to be an actor, not a beloved star, but a despised performer, balancing between pity, hatred, and the constant fear of the law and the indifference of those around you. This is not a heroic saga, but an honest chronicle of a world where survival itself is an achievement. In this dull, grim, and deeply realistic narrative, the only real hope is simply the ability not to disappear and not to forget that even in the filthiest corner of the city, a person can still dream of a miracle. But before you get comfortable, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments what city you are watching from and what time it is there. I'm really curious to see who has joined us. Now, make yourself comfortable. We begin. You do not awaken so much as you surrender to the realization that you have once again survived the night. Somewhere in the early gray, the icy bite of a medieval morning seeps into your bones through a thin blanket that is more lice than fabric. The straw mat beneath you crunches as you shift, scattering a confetti of flea dirt. You can taste the cold, and you can smell it too: mildew, rot, the tang of urine, a perfume no one dares to name. It is dark, so dark that the only proof of morning is the faintly paler rectangle where the cracked shutter gapes, letting in a trickle of dawn and a draft of air that carries last night's outhouse scents with it. There is no rooster, only the groans and coughs of your 5 companions, fellow actors who make up what you would call your troupe if you were in the mood for optimism. Someone is snoring. Someone is muttering in a language you barely understand. You think it is Bertolt, your companion from a region best left unmentioned. The sound of his words is softer than the rats gnawing somewhere in the walls. You stretch or try to, and feel the ache of a body that never quite recovers from a day of mud, laughter, and thrown stones. There is a sharp pain in your right shoulder, a souvenir from last week's unfortunate run in with a butcher's boy who did not appreciate your jokes about his mother. There is a bruise on your thigh, still swollen from where you fell, trying to outrun the city guard. You do not remember ever having a morning free of pain. You sit up. Your head brushes the roof, sending a sprinkle of dust into your eyes. The ceiling is so low you have learned not to stand suddenly, a lesson taught by lumps and curses in the night. It is, technically, a room, that is to say, 4 walls, a roof, and not much else. The place was once a storeroom, but now it is the proud home of the city's poorest entertainers. You and your companions, who share not only dreams of applause, but also fleas, hunger, and an endlessly replenished stockpile of personal misery. You look around. Hans is still asleep, curled up like a dying dog, mouth open and drooling on a ragged cloak. His feet, for some reason, are bare, sticking out from beneath the fabric, blue with cold, and covered in something you do not want to identify. Next to him is Elspeth, the only woman in the troop who guards her corner with such ferocity that she once stabbed you with a spoon for trying to borrow her blanket. She is awake, glaring at you, daring you to even consider conversation. You feel the day pressing on you already, an enormous, smothering blanket of inevitability. There will be no fire. Firewood is for the wealthy, or, at least, for those who have something worth burning. Your only source of warmth is the body heat of your companions, a communal misery, but a practical one. The straw smells of old sweat and rat droppings, but it is better than the bare floor, which is as unforgiving as the life you have chosen. You reach down and find your shoes, stiff with yesterday's mud and some other substance you do not recognize. You would like to wash them, or your feet, or perhaps your entire existence, but there is no water except for what you collect from the leaky roof in a bucket that doubles as a chamber pot. You peer inside. The water is a murky brown. You consider it. You put the lid back on. Later, perhaps, if thirst or desperation win out over taste. There is a mouse in your pack. You can hear it rustling, searching for crumbs that do not exist. You cannot blame it. Hunger unites all creatures, from princes to lice. You feel for your pouch of coins, find nothing but a stone, and remember that you are, as always, poor in every sense. Your stomach growls. You are not alone in this. Across the cramped room, hunger is the universal language, and it is spoken fluently by every belly present. Someone sneezes, you think it is Hans. The sneeze is wet, productive, and immediately followed by a string of curses and an argument over who has the worst cold. You do not participate. Your throat hurts too much to waste words. For a moment, you lie back down, wondering what would happen if you simply refused to get up. Would anyone notice? Would the world keep turning if one more nameless fool lay down and let the cold claim him? Almost certainly. But hunger is a powerful motivator, and so you rise, as you do every morning, to face another day in a world that neither knows nor cares that you exist. You gather your few possessions, a tattered cloak, a wooden cup, a mask that is missing an ear. You put them in your bag, careful not to disturb the mouse. You stand up, head brushing the ceiling, and prepare yourself for the day ahead. There will be no applause, no warm meal, no soft bed at the end of it. There will be mud and rain and the laughter of cruel children. There will be insults, bruises, and perhaps a thrown stone or two. But there will also be the hope, small as a crumb in a starving mouth, that today will be a little less bad than yesterday. You step into the dawn, into the cold, into another day in the life of a medieval actor. The world is waiting. It is not waiting for you, but it is waiting all the same. You know it is morning, not because you have eaten, but because the gnawing in your stomach has reached the level where it is louder than your own thoughts. There is no grand breakfast here, no smells of sizzling bacon or warm, rising bread. The only thing rising is your disappointment, alongside the faint hope that perhaps, by some miracle, One of your companions has managed to save a crust from last night's spoils. You rummage through your belongings, a process that takes all of a minute since you own nearly nothing. Your hand closes on a lump that is allegedly bread. You are not sure when you last acquired it. It is hard as a cobblestone, and if you threw it at Hans, he would likely lose another tooth. You consider this briefly. Elspeth glares at you as though she can read your mind. The moment passes, no violence before breakfast. It is a rule as much for your own sake as for hers. You gnaw at the bread. The surface is tough, but with enough spit and determination, it begins to soften. You pretend not to notice the green fuzz growing on one edge. Mold is, after all, just another flavor, an herbal note if you are feeling optimistic. You scrape off the largest patch with a fingernail, flicking it to the floor. The mouse will appreciate the treat. Elspeth produces something from the depths of her cloak. It is a turnip, wizened and shriveled, more brown than white. You exchange a piece of your bread for a bite. Barter is the language of survival. You chew, grateful for the moisture, even if it tastes like dirt and bitterness. Bertold attempts to trade a song for a mouthful, but no one is in the mood for music. Breakfast requires silence, concentration, and the careful rationing of every crumb. Water is another matter. There is none, at least not clean. The rainwater in the bucket is a last resort, one you are not yet desperate enough to consider. Instead, you reach for the ale, if it can be called that. It is weak, barely fermented, more water than beer. The local tavern keeper sells it for next to nothing, because it is, in truth, next to nothing. But it is wet, and it fills the mouth, and, on rare occasions, it even chases away the taste of moldy bread. You swallow, grimacing at the aftertaste of metal and wood. The cup is passed around, each of you careful not to drink too much. There is no more to be had until the next performance, and even then, only if the day is kind. The hunger never really leaves. You speak of it like an old friend, one who visits daily, never overstaying his welcome because he never really leaves at all. You remember, dimly, what it was like to feel full, but the memory is soft around the edges, like a dream half remembered upon waking. These days, hunger is a companion. You learn to ignore it, to make room for it in the same way you make room for cold, pain, and disappointment. After breakfast, or what passes for it, the true hunt begins. The search for anything edible left behind in the refuse of the richer townsfolk. You and your troop wander the alleys, peering into barrels and buckets, hoping to find something, anything, worth eating. Sometimes you are lucky. A half gnawed bone, a wilted leaf of cabbage, the crust from someone's discarded pie. More often, you find only rot and disappointment. Still, you keep searching. Hope is stubborn, and hunger even more so. On occasion, you come across a fat rat, bold and unafraid. You have tried in the past to catch them, but they are clever and fast. Elspeth once managed to stun one with a well thrown rock. You all shared the bounty, if boiled rat can be called a bounty. It was stringy and tough, but it was meat, and for a moment you all felt a little more alive, a little less empty. You see the butchers setting up their stalls. You sidle up, hopeful, trying to look harmless and hungry at the same time. If the mood strikes them, they might toss you a bone, a lump of gristle, or a handful of something unidentifiable, but technically edible. You thank them with a bow and a flourish, performing for your supper before the day has even properly begun. The children who watch you giggle, covering their noses against your smell. Their parents glare, murmuring about beggars and thieves. You smile anyway, teeth stained with last night's wine, or was it blood? It is hard to tell in this light. Hans, ever resourceful, manages to filch a handful of dried peas from an inattentive merchant. You congratulate him quietly, admiring his skill. He offers to share, and you all gather around, counting out the peas like precious stones. There are not enough to fill a single mouth, but you each take one, roll it on your tongue, and savor the flavor. This is what passes for luxury. You return to your corner, where the troop is assembling their meager belongings, preparing for the day's labor. The ritual is always the same: scavenging, bartering, begging, and, if you are lucky, eating. You glance at the sky, gray and heavy, promising rain or worse. The day stretches before you, long and uncertain. You pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders, pretending it is thicker than it is, pretending you are warmer than you feel. You dream for a moment of feasts, roast fowl, sweetmeats, fresh bread, wine as red as blood. You know you will never taste such things, not unless fortune changes her mind, not unless your troop is summoned to perform before a noble, which happens about as often as it snows in midsummer. Still, the dream is there, persistent as the hunger in your belly. You break off the last piece of bread and offer it to Elspeth, who takes it with a nod. The others follow suit, each sharing what little they have, each hoping the act of kindness will be repaid in some small way. It is the only wealth you possess, the knowledge that, as little as you have, you still have more than nothing, and that there is always someone with less. Breakfast is over. You are not full, you are not even satisfied, but you are alive, and for now, that is enough. The city is waking. The bells ring in the distance, calling the faithful to prayer and the rest to work. You gather your things, such as they are, and prepare to face the day, hungry as always, with the taste of mold and hope on your tongue. You step out into the world, which is to say, you step into a mixture of mud, manure, and misery. The city greets you the same way it greets every morning, with a slap in the face and a lingering sense of regret. The street is already alive, if what you call alive is a sprawling tangle of bodies, carts, stray dogs, and refuse. The air is a stew of odors: rotting vegetables, horse dung, unwashed humanity, and, if the wind is right, a trace of urine from the alley behind the baker's shop. This, you think wryly, is the aroma of opportunity. Your troupe is already drifting toward the marketplace, which is both the heart of the city and the bowels of its discontent. The market is where everyone who is anyone and everyone who is no one eventually ends up. Merchants hawk wares, children scream, beggars whine, and the town crier bellows news you already know and would rather forget. Somewhere, a dog is barking. Somewhere else, someone is being sick into the gutter. You must find a place to perform, and not just any place. The good corners are already taken, staked out by rivals whose faces are as familiar to you as your own. There is the puppet master with his threadbare marionettes and a nose like a carrot. There is the juggler whose skill is inversely proportional to his sense of humor. There are the singers, the flute players, the dancers, each one jostling for space, each one with an eye on the crowds and a foot ready to kick you out of the way. It is a delicate dance, this business of finding your spot. Too close to the butcher's stall, and you will be drowned out by the squeals of dying pigs. Too near the fishmongers, and the smell alone will drive away any audience with a sense of self preservation. The best place is by the well, where people gather to gossip and watch, but that spot is jealously guarded by a one eyed storyteller who once bit a rival's ear clean off. You do not want to test his patience or his teeth. You move through the throng, eyes scanning for openings, ears pricked for the telltale sound of a crowd gathering. Sometimes, if you are lucky, a space opens up when a fight breaks out, or when the city guard moves someone along for being too loud, too drunk, or simply too poor. You keep your head down, your mask tucked in under your arm, ready to claim your place the moment fortune smiles your way. Of course, there is always danger. The city guard does not like actors, especially those who draw crowds that might become unruly. More than once, you have been chased away with threats and, on occasion, with a sharp boot to the backside. You have learned to watch for the flash of a metal helmet or the barked command of authority. To perform is to live on the edge. You must be loud enough to draw attention, but not so loud as to draw the wrong kind. Competition is fierce. The juggler eyes you with open disdain, tossing his apples high enough to let you know he would just as soon throw one at your head. The puppet master whispers threats, quietly enough that only you hear. It is an unspoken rule that violence is bad for business, but accidents happen, especially in a crowd, especially when money is at stake. You keep your back to a wall, your pouch hidden, your wits as sharp as hunger will allow. You finally claim a patch of cobblestone by a tanner's stall, the air thick with the smell of animal skins and caustic chemicals. It is not ideal, but it is available. You set down your bag, spread your arms, and begin the slow, careful process of assembling your stage. A faded blanket for a backdrop, a chipped wooden stool for a prop, a battered mask for the face you wear when you would rather be anyone but yourself. The crowd is thin, distracted by the spectacle of a street brawl down the way. A woman is shouting at a chicken thief. A cluster of children is jeering at a hunchbacked peddler. You raise your voice, calling out a greeting, summoning anyone bored enough or curious enough to stop and watch. You know from experience that it only takes one or two people to form a crowd. The rest will follow, drawn by the mysterious power of human curiosity and the hope of a free distraction. It is a dangerous game, this business of performing in public. The people are fickle, their moods as unpredictable as the weather. Sometimes they laugh, sometimes they jeer, sometimes they throw coins, sometimes stones. You remember the time a baker's apprentice, fueled by drink and bravado, decided you were a suitable target for yesterday's hard rolls. You still have the bruise. You still have the roll, in fact. It is in your bag, waiting to be softened with ale, or, failing that, used as a weapon against the next idiot who thinks actors are there to be abused. The city is unforgiving. It does not care about your art, your skill, or your suffering. It cares only for amusement, for novelty, for anything that distracts from the daily grind of filth and poverty. You are a momentary diversion, a passing fancy. The city will forget you the moment you are gone, but while you are here, you must make yourself unforgettable, if only for the length of a song, a joke, a juggled turnip. As you prepare, you watch the crowd. There is a little girl staring at you with wide eyes and an empty hand. There is an old man picking his teeth with a bone, eyeing your mask with suspicion. There is a group of teenagers already whispering insults, waiting to see if you are worth their attention or their scorn. You take a deep breath, the air thick with city stink and expectation. Somewhere nearby, a fight breaks out. The crowd shifts, surges, flows like sewage. You seize your moment, step forward, and begin your performance, such as it is. The city will judge you, as it judges everyone, by your ability to distract it from its own wretchedness. For now, that is all you can hope for. And so you perform, because the city does not care, because the world will not wait, because in the end, a patch of filthy cobblestone and a handful of half interested strangers is the best you are ever likely to get. There is a special kind of shame in being a medieval actor, and it lives in your wardrobe. You could call it a costume trunk, but that would suggest a trunk which you do not possess. Instead, you have a burlap sack and a collection of scraps, each with its own smell and backstory, none of them pleasant. If you are lucky, the rags are only dirty. If not, they are also damp. If you are very unlucky, they are moving. Before any performance, the troupe gathers together for the sacred ritual of assembling the spectacle. This is a generous way of describing the scramble for anything that does not look like it was pulled directly from a rubbish heap, although in truth, everything has been. Elspeth produces a tattered dress with stains of uncertain origin, holding it up with the pinched expression of someone weighing whether dignity or warmth is more important. She chooses warmth. Bertolt emerges from the pile, triumphantly waving a battered hat adorned with a limp feather and something that may once have been a decorative bell. The bell does not ring. It only rattles like the teeth of the old. You dig through your own pitiful belongings. There is the mask, missing one ear and most of its paint, a relic of a happier time, or a cruel joke played by fate. The wooden nose is chipped, giving the character an air of permanent disappointment. The string holding it together is so frayed that you would not trust it to hold up a curtain, let alone the illusion of theater. Still, you tie it on, wincing as the rough twine bites into the back of your head. Someone, perhaps in a fit of inspiration, suggests swapping costumes, as though this will fool the audience into thinking you are a fresh act. Hans, ever the optimist, dons Elspeth's shawl and manages to look even more pathetic than usual. The rest of you laugh, not because it is funny, but because it is that or cry. Inventory is important. You count props like a miser counts coins. 2 wooden spoons, one cracked, both sticky. A cloth chicken with most of its stuffing gone. A broom handle masquerading as a sword. And 3 colored scarves that have seen better centuries. You are missing a lute string, but no one can remember the last time you had a full set of strings, so this is only mildly disappointing. You search your pockets, find a broken comb, a bent nail, and a pebble shaped almost like a heart. The pebble is your lucky charm, which is, you suppose, all one needs to know about your luck. Costumes are communal property. In theory, this means you share everything. In practice, it means that nothing belongs to anyone for long. A pair of shoes changes owners 3 times before breakfast. A particularly fetching cloak is the subject of a whispered argument, which Elspeth settles with a glare. You have learned that it is better not to argue with Elspeth, especially when she has something sharp nearby. Occasionally, you acquire new items, though new is a relative term. Perhaps you find a hat dropped in the mud by a careless merchant, or a scarf pilfered from a distracted washerwoman. Theft is a crime, of course, but hunger is persuasive, and morality is a luxury for people with full bellies. Besides, anything left unattended for more than a minute in this city is fair game, at least according to the rules followed by everyone you know. Repairs are a daily task. Hans is the closest thing you have to a tailor. With a needle borrowed from a cobbler and thread scavenged from unraveling hems, he patches holes with patches of other holes. The result is a tapestry of failure and necessity, a garment held together more by willpower than skill. No one expects perfection. Perfection is for the wealthy, and even they do not always pull it off. You settle for clothes that cover the necessary bits and try not to think about how many lice have made a home in the seams. Sometimes you stumble upon a real treasure, a bit of faded ribbon, a button that matches another, a length of rope sturdy enough to serve as a belt. These finds are cause for celebration, brief, subdued, but genuine. You remember the day Elspeth found a pair of gloves, one with only 2 fingers missing. She wore them all winter, boasting of her good fortune. The rest of you watched with envy, but you said nothing. In this life, you take happiness where you can find it, even if it is someone else's happiness. The final step before performance is the inspection. You line up, turning in a slow circle, presenting yourself to your peers for judgment. Criticism is plentiful, as are jokes. You adjust each other's collars, wipe away the worst of the grime, and try to brush straw out of each other's hair. It is a little like grooming in a troop of monkeys, and about as dignified. Still, you do it because you are all you have. No one else will care if your mask is crooked or your shoe is on the wrong foot. You care because the illusion must be maintained, if only for an hour. Once ready, you bundle up your props, wrap yourself in your patched, stolen, borrowed finery, and prepare to step into the mud and the stares of the crowd. The costume does not make you someone else. So, every morning, you drag yourself through the mud, bow in hand, to a battered stretch of common ground beyond the huts. The field where you train is not a field at all, but a patch of earth churned to black ooze by generations of boots. You are no longer simply a hungry, desperate fool. You are now a hungry, desperate fool dressed as a king, or a jester, or a demon, depending on the play and the whims of the day. There is one last check. Someone always forgets something. Bertolt has lost the wooden chicken again. A frantic search turns it up in a puddle, soggy, and a little worse for wear, but still recognizably a chicken. You all laugh, again, not because it is funny, but because the alternative is despair. With everything more or less accounted for, you shoulder your burdens and make your way back to your patch of cobblestone, ready to offer your meager spectacle to a city that neither asked for it nor wants it. In this world, image is everything, and your image is a patchwork of desperation and resilience. As you take your place among the other performers, you wonder if anyone watching will notice how threadbare your costume is, how many holes you have hidden under borrowed scarves, how many stains you wear like badges of survival. Probably not. The crowd does not care. They are here for a laugh, a distraction, a story. You are here to provide it, dressed in all the finery poverty can offer. You look at your companions, your rivals, your friends, your only family. You see the same mix of hope and resignation in their eyes that you feel in your own. You give a little bow, an exaggerated flourish, and the performance, such as it is, begins before the first line is ever spoken. No matter how many times you have done this, rehearsal is always an ordeal. It is not the glamour of the stage, nor the wild, thundering applause that actors of legend whisper about. Here in your world, rehearsal is another word for public humiliation with witnesses. And today, the witnesses are a dog with an eye infection and a pair of suspicious chickens. You gather behind a stable, squeezed between a pile of frozen manure and a wall streaked with something you do not want to examine too closely. The wind whips around the corner, dragging with it bits of straw, broken curses from the street, and the perpetual, gnawing cold that seems to seep up from the ground itself. You stamp your feet for warmth, but it does not help. Nothing helps, except perhaps the promise of being done with this, and even that is a thin hope. Rehearsal is led by Bertolt, who has declared himself director on account of having the loudest voice and the thickest skull. He holds the tattered script in hands that shake either from the cold or from the after effects of last night's ale. No one asks which. He reads the lines with no enthusiasm, as though reciting a list of debts. His voice is a monotone dirge, flattening jokes into tragedies and love scenes into funeral rites. Elspeth, always impatient, interrupts. She knows her part by heart. She knows everyone's part by heart. And she is quick to point out every mistake, every stumble, every line spoken out of turn. Her criticism is never gentle. Are you going to play the fool, or are you just naturally like this? She hisses at Hans, who drops his wooden sword and immediately starts arguing that it was the wind's fault. A chicken looks on, unimpressed. You watch the bickering, feeling your own irritation simmer. It is cold. You are hungry. You have rehearsed these lines so many times, you could recite them backward in your sleep while being chased by dogs. Yet still you rehearse, because practice is all that separates you from outright chaos. Well, practice and a healthy fear of Elspeth's sharp tongue. Someone always forgets their lines. Someone always drops a prop. Someone always, without fail, steps in something they wish they had not. Today it is you, and the smell follows you around like a personal curse. The others laugh, and you pretend to join in, but secretly you wish you were anywhere else, perhaps even in a warm grave. The rehearsal limps on. The script is battered and mostly illegible in places, ink smeared by rain and grease and worse. Where the words have faded, you improvise. This is, after all, the core skill of the actor, not remembering the script, but pretending you have. What comes next? Bertolt asks, squinting at the page. A miracle, you reply, and the others laugh, because it is true. Every performance that does not end in disaster is a miracle. The stage is uneven, a patch of dirt riddled with frozen ruts and chicken droppings. You take your place, slip, nearly fall, and decide to stay where you land. Hans stands opposite you, brandishing the broom handle sword with as much menace as a stick can muster. You begin your scene, projecting your voice to the chickens, the dog, and the occasional passerby who glances your way before moving on with studied indifference. Disagreements are constant. Bertolt wants more passion. Elspeth wants less. Hans wants a chance to try his own lines, which are terrible, but in a way, so bad they almost come around to being good again. You argue over timing, over blocking, over whose turn it is to play the fool. It is always yours in the end. The cold makes tempers short, and hunger makes them shorter. Occasionally, you catch yourself wondering what you are doing here, freezing in an alley, arguing over lines no one will remember in a play no one asked for. You think of your old life, if you ever had one. You think of the life you might have had if you had learned a trade, married a baker's daughter, become someone respectable. Then Bertolt yells at you to focus for the love of all that is miserable, and you remember where you are. There is a moment, rare but real, when the rehearsal stumbles into something almost like magic. You hit your lines, the others respond, and for an instant, you remember why you do this. The brief, bright flash of creation, the illusion that you are someone else, somewhere else, if only for a heartbeat. It never lasts. The cold always returns, dragging you back to the mud and the stench and the sound of your own stomach groaning. Rehearsal ends not with triumph, but with exhaustion. Your fingers are numb, your lips are cracked. Bertolt declares it good enough, which is as close to praise as you will get. Elspeth mutters about amateurs and storms off to find something, anything, better than your company. Hans is already picking over the manure pile for lost coins or edible beetles. You gather your things, the props and the battered script, and trudge back to the city square where the real ordeal awaits. You do not feel prepared, you never do. But the show must go on, not because anyone wants it to, but because hunger demands it, and there is no other way to survive. You leave the chickens to their own performance. You envy them in a way. No lines to remember, no audience to please, no dreams to haunt them. Just cold and hunger and the endless, indifferent world. You know it is only a matter of time before the authorities come to remind you of your place in the world. This city, like every city, is a tangle of rules, taxes, and men whose only job is to make sure the likes of you never forget how unwelcome you truly are. Today, the reminder arrives early in the person of the overseer and his two favorite henchmen. You spot them weaving through the crowd, their red sashes a warning sign to all who do not wish to part with their hard won coins. The overseer is a man who carries his authority like a club. His nose is broken, his fingers are thick with the rings of past bribes, and his eyes are sharp enough to spot a coin at 50 paces, or, more importantly, to spot the absence of one. His mouth twists in a perpetual sneer. He is not a man who ever intended to laugh at your jokes. You brace yourself. The performance has not even started, and already you know that today will cost you. There is a shuffling among your troupe as everyone checks their pockets, counting and recounting the pitiful collection of copper coins that make up your daily earnings. There is never enough, not for food, not for clothes, and certainly not for bribes. Yet, bribes must be paid. This is the rule, the only rule that matters. The overseer approaches, trailed by his men, one thin and nervous, the other wide as a beer barrel, both with the blank, watchful eyes of men who have spent their lives looking for trouble and then pretending to solve it. You force a smile, though your mouth is dry. The others do the same. Hans offers a stumbling bow, which earns him a snort of amusement from the wide one. Elspeth crosses her arms, eyes narrowed. Bertolt clutches the bag of props a little tighter. Well, what do we have here? The overseer begins, his voice slick as spoiled butter. Actors, entertainers, the pride of our city, come to delight the masses. His tone makes it clear what he thinks of all three of those titles. You know your part in this play. You shuffle your feet, look humble, try to appear as harmless as possible. The overseer circles you, picking up the battered mask, sniffing at a prop, pretending to care about the details of your trade. What he really cares about is your purse. Busy day, is it? He asks, as if you are old friends. Many admirers, much applause. I trust you have remembered the city's rules about public performances. You have remembered. You remember every morning, every time you look at the coins that should buy bread, but instead go to the men who own the streets. The overseer's hand extends, palm up, and you do not hesitate. You drop 3 coins into his hand. Elspeth adds 2 more. Bertolt, with great reluctance, offers another. Hans comes up short, and the thin henchman steps forward, glaring. You find 1 more coin to cover for him, teeth clenched so hard your jaw aches. The overseer weighs the coins, frowning. This seems a little light. You know, it takes a great deal of effort to keep the peace in this city. Trouble can start anywhere, with anyone. He looks you up and down, as if expecting trouble to leap out from under your patched cloak. It would be a shame if the city guard had to take an interest in your little enterprise. You know what comes next. The threats are always the same, delivered with the casual boredom of a man reciting a bedtime story for the 1000th time. We hear things, the overseer continues, his eyes on Bertolt. Complaints about noise, about beggars and thieves, about actors who do not show proper respect. He leans in, his breath sour with onions. Respect must be paid, one way or another. You murmur apologies. You swear you are only here to entertain, that you mean no harm, that you respect the city's fine traditions. It is a farce, and everyone knows it, but you perform your part dutifully. The overseer pockets the coins, nods once, and steps back. See that you remember, he says. We would not want any accidents. As quickly as they came, the authorities move on, leaving behind only the memory of their sneers and the sharp ache in your gut where your breakfast money used to be. You look at your companions. No one speaks. There is nothing to say. The rules are simple. Pay or suffer. Today you have paid. Tomorrow you will pay again. This is how the world works, and you are grateful that for once the price was only coins. The worst days are when the overseer is in a bad mood, or when his men have not collected enough elsewhere. Then the threats grow sharper and the bribes become outright robbery. Sometimes you are accused of crimes you did not commit, disturbing the peace, blasphemy, even sorcery. The charge does not matter. The only thing that matters is that you are guilty by virtue of being poor, visible, and unwanted. You have heard stories of actors dragged before the magistrate, forced to answer for jokes that pricked the wrong ego, for lines interpreted as seditious, for daring to amuse the crowd without permission. You know what happens to those who cannot pay. Days in the stocks, a public whipping, or a night in the city's dankest cell. You know what happens to women caught up in these accusations? How easily a rumor of witchcraft can catch fire. How little it takes for a woman like Elspeth to go from entertainer to devil's handmaid. It is a game you can never win. Your existence is a daily negotiation, a constant performance in which failure is punished and success is punished just as surely, only a little more slowly. You pay to work, you pay to live, you pay to avoid the kind of attention that leaves bruises and scars. Sometimes you hear outsiders, travelers with clean shoes and confident smiles, complain about the disorder of the city. They wish the guard would do more to keep the streets clean, to rid the town of beggars and rabble. You wonder if they would change their tune if they had to pay for the privilege of breathing the city's air. You wonder if they have ever been on the wrong end of the overseer's smile. You try to shake off the humiliation. You focus on your task, performing, surviving, making enough to pay tomorrow's bribe. The city never forgets its debts, and neither can you. You gather your troop, force another smile, and remind everyone to keep an eye out for the red sashes of the city guard. There are worse things than bribes. You have seen actors disappear quietly, their spots filled by others before the dust has settled. You have heard whispers of those who refused to pay, who thought themselves too clever or too desperate to be caught. No one speaks their names for long. In this city, the only thing shorter than a poor man's memory is a poor man's life. The morning has barely begun, and already you are poorer, hungrier, and more afraid. But you are still free, free in the only way that matters, which is to say, not currently in jail, not currently being beaten, not currently at the center of a crowd with stones in their hands. You cling to that freedom, such as it is, and prepare for the day's first real performance. With luck, it will be enough to buy tomorrow. There is a ritual to becoming someone else, and for you, it begins with grime. If a costume is the skin of a performance, then makeup is its war paint, a mask not of beauty, but of necessity, of desperation, of survival by disguise. In stories told by those who have never missed a meal, an actor's makeup box is a treasure chest of colors and scents, rich powders and soft brushes. In your world, it is a battered bowl filled with ash, grease, and regret. You sit on a broken crate, pulling your cloak tight against the wind. Around you, your companions are already hard at work, transforming their faces into the familiar masks of fools, villains, lovers, and monsters. The supplies are meager, a few lumps of soot scraped from the bottom of a blackened pot, animal fat filched from a butcher's cart, the dregs of a lamp oil bottle, some crushed berries, when you can find them, which is rarely. Elspeth, the only one with anything resembling skill, has a rag stained with leftover rouge, now more brown than red, which she shares with only the stingiest of compliments. You rub your fingers in the ash, feeling the grit scrape beneath your nails. With practiced gestures, you smear black lines beneath your eyes, tracing the shadows that sleepless nights have already carved into your face. The fat goes next, sticky and pungent, leaving a sheen that glistens in the morning light. It is not pleasant. The scent is something between spoiled bacon and rancid tallow. You breathe through your mouth, refusing to think about the flies that circle hopefully. Hans applies his makeup with the care of a condemned man tying his own noose. He smears a thick layer of soot across his cheeks, then pinches the end of his nose until it is red enough to be visible from a distance. The effect is neither tragic nor comic, but something in between, a face you might see in a nightmare after a particularly bad meal. Bertolt, meanwhile, dabs at a streak of oil, blending it into the lines of his forehead, then pauses to pick a splinter from his palm. He mutters curses in his native tongue, words that sound even darker than the grime on his skin. Elspeth is the last to begin, watching the rest of you with a mixture of amusement and disdain. Her fingers are nimble, deftly weaving streaks of ash and bits of crushed leaf into something almost artistic. She borrows your cloak for a moment, tears off a thread, and uses it to tie back her hair. For a brief instant, you see the ghost of her old self, a face that might have been beautiful in another life before cold and hunger and exhaustion had their way with her. She catches your eye and scowls, wiping a smudge of grease across her chin. There is no mirror, only the gleam of dirty metal in the bottom of a cup. You peer into your reflection, adjusting the lines of soot, tugging at the mask until it sits just so. The transformation is never complete, never convincing enough to fool yourself. But perhaps, if the light is bad and the crowd is drunk, it will be enough. In any case, it must be enough. The city demands a show, and the show demands a mask. You remember stories of great actors, men and women who performed before kings, whose faces were painted by servants with brushes made from the tails of white horses, whose skin was smoothed with oils brought from distant lands. You try to imagine the weight of that luxury on your own skin, but the thought slips away, replaced by the sharp reality of cold fingers and greasy cheeks. Sometimes the makeup stings. The ash grates against raw patches of skin. The oil, gone sour, leaves a burning itch that you will not be able to ignore for hours. Worse is the knowledge that all of it, every streak, every smear, every ugly line, will have to be scrubbed off later with the same water you use to clean your feet. There is nothing romantic about transformation, not in your world. There is only the endless work of making do, of pretending that every new day brings a new chance, instead of the same old misery in a different mask. You watch your companions, each one lost in their own preparations. The routine is familiar: scrape, smear, dab, blend. Sometimes, if spirits are high, someone will hum a song or mutter a rude joke. Today, spirits are low and silence reigns. You hear only the wet squelch of fat, the rasp of a brush made from bundled twigs, the occasional curse as a drop of oil stings a fresh cut. A child appears at the edge of your circle, staring with wide, unblinking eyes. You bare your teeth in a mockery of a smile, and the child takes a step back, then another, before vanishing into the press of the crowd. You wonder if your face is more frightening now than it was before the makeup. You suspect it is. When you are done, you gather what is left of your supplies, careful to save even the tiniest scrap. Waste is a sin, and you cannot afford to anger whatever gods might be watching by throwing away even a crumb of soot. Elspeth ties the rouge stained rag around her wrist. Hans tucks his last bit of fat into his pocket. Bertolt runs a greasy hand through his hair, sighs, and pronounces you all ready. Ready, of course, is a relative term. You are not ready for the cold, or the hunger, or the contempt of the city. You are not ready for the jeers, the thrown stones, the moments when you forget your lines and the crowd begins to turn. But you are ready enough to pretend. You are ready enough to stand in the mud, in the stink, in the ruin of your ambitions, and play your part. You step into position, feeling the mask settle over your true face, feeling the weight of expectation press down on your shoulders. The crowd is gathering, slowly, reluctantly, like animals drawn to a fire they cannot decide to fear or ignore. You draw a breath, taste the ash and oil on your lips, and prepare to become someone else. This is your craft. This is your curse. You are a creature of soot and grease, of borrowed rags and stolen stories. You are an actor, and this is the face the world deserves. You take your place before the crowd, such as it is. There are days when you think of audiences as grand gatherings, hundreds packed shoulder to shoulder, breathless in anticipation. Today is not such a day. Today, you have 5 housewives with baskets, a handful of children chewing on rags, 2 old men arguing about taxes, and a dog that appears more interested in its own fleas than in you. The marketplace hums around you, a living thing, loud and distracted. Carts rumble by, merchants shout over one another, and the air is so thick with the smells of fish, manure, and spoiled cabbage that your performance will need to be extraordinary just to rise above the stench. You set your jaw, gather your rags and your courage, and bow deeply, the traditional beginning that nobody notices. Hans opens with a flourish, tossing his hat into the air and catching it on his elbow. It is supposed to be a joke, but the hat is so battered that it folds in on itself like a dead bird, earning a single unamused glance from an old woman. Bertolt attempts a somersault and nearly succeeds, except that his knee buckles and he lands on his rear in a puddle. The children snicker, and one of them tosses a pebble. It hits his shin with a wet sound. Elspeth, forced into the role of noble lady, rolls her eyes so theatrically you are not sure if she is acting or merely annoyed. You launch into your first lines, voice projected above the chaos, each word enunciated as if the fate of your supper depends on it, because in fact it does. You recite lines about love and betrayal, about fools who would be kings and kings who are only fools, but the words scatter in the wind, barely noticed. The crowd is restless. Some yawn. Some talk among themselves, paying more attention to the price of onions than to the trials of your characters. The children are the only truly engaged audience, but their engagement is cruel. They giggle, call you names, and dare each other to get close enough to tug on Elspeth's skirts or steal Hans's hat. You shoo them away, but it is futile. You are a target, soft, visible, ridiculous in your patched finery and grime streaked faces. One of the boys throws a rotten apple. It misses, but the point is made. A merchant leans out from his stall, shouts at you to keep the noise down. No one buys when the rabble is shouting, he complains, as if your muttered lines and Bertolt's clumsy pratfalls are the reason his fish have turned. You apologize, Bao, try to win him over with a joke, but he only waves you off. You cannot afford to lose even this space, so you nod humbly and move a few steps away into a patch of mud that seems determined to swallow your shoe. You push on. The routine is automatic by now. A slapstick fight with broomstick swords, Elspeth's tragic monologue, Hans's absurd, off key song. Each act is met with polite indifference at best, outright hostility at worst. A dog lifts its leg against your prop stool, and no one seems to notice. Yet, even here, even in the midst of this indifference and squalor, you search the crowd for a hint of a smile, a flicker of attention, a sign that someone, somewhere, might be listening. Occasionally, you catch an old man's eyes fixed on you, not with delight, but with a vague confusion, as if trying to remember where he has seen such foolishness before. It is not much, but it is something. The real reason for the performance is not art, not even amusement, but coins. At the end of the first act, you bow again, and Bertolt passes the battered cup through the audience. It is a humiliating ritual, one that never grows easier. Some avert their eyes, embarrassed for you. Others sneer openly. The first coin, a copper, badly clipped, lands in the cup, tossed by a toothless woman who mutters something about God's mercy on beggars. A second follows from a sympathetic apprentice, his master glaring at him the whole time. More often, it is not coins, but scraps you receive: the crust of bread, a bit of string, a shriveled plum, a pebble meant as a joke. Hans receives a particularly nasty surprise. Someone spits in the cup. He wipes it out on his sleeve, shrugs, and keeps going. Pride is for those with options. Elspeth's song, a plaintive tune about lost love and found poverty, earns the most sympathy, but also the most jeers. Some of the market boys shout crude suggestions, making sport of her voice. She ignores them, but you see the way her jaw clenches, the way her eyes grow colder. The market does not give gifts without demanding something in return. There is, inevitably, a moment when the crowd grows ugly. An argument breaks out over who owns the space you are standing in, or someone decides your performance is an insult to God, or simply that you look like someone worth kicking. The city guard wanders by, eyes you with the same disinterest as everyone else, and keeps walking. So long as you are not making trouble, you are invisible. You thank whatever saints look after fools and actors for this small mercy. You gather what coins you can, a pitiful handful, barely enough to buy a crust or two at the end of the day. It is not enough, but it is more than nothing, which is the standard by which you measure success. Bertold counts the take, sighs, and tucks the cup away, careful to shield it from prying eyes. More than once, you have had your earnings stolen before you could spend them. The performance winds down, as performances do, not with applause, but with the gradual leaking away of your audience. Housewives remember their errands. Children are called home. Old men return to their arguing, and the market returns to the normal grind of haggling, shouting, and stench. You are left standing in the mud, costumes filthy, faces smeared, hearts heavy. You force a final bow, more out of habit than hope. A single coin glints in the dust at your feet, a miracle or an accident. You pocket it, trying not to think about the days when even this small victory would have seemed like failure. You look to your companions, all of you a little more worn, a little more silent. No one speaks. There is nothing to say. The show is over, and you are still hungry. As you pack up your props, you watch the next troupe set up in your place, their faces painted, their smiles wide, their hope not yet crushed by the weight of indifference. You wish them luck, though you know they will need more than that. The city does not care for actors. The city does not care for anyone. You move on, searching for the next patch of cobblestone, the next indifferent crowd, the next handful of coins. The day is far from over, and so, for better or worse, are you. With the last coins clinking at the bottom of your battered cup, you gather your troop and limp away from the square. The crowds there are finished with you, as are the market vendors. Once you were a novelty, now you are simply in the way. The city's appetite for amusement is small, but its appetite for cruelty is endless. You shuffle through alleys, your costumes flapping in the chill wind, Hans humming tunelessly under his breath. Bertold counts and recounts the day's earnings, squinting at the dull coppers, as if by sheer will he might double their number. He cannot. Elspeth says nothing, but you can feel her hunger in the set of her shoulders, the tightness around her eyes. All of you know what comes next. It is time to risk the taverns. Taverns are not for the faint of heart. The air is thicker there, spiced with sweat, old ale, smoke, and the sharp tang of desperation. The people who fill them are rougher, more dangerous than the city's other residents. The men are quick with their fists and their tempers, and quick to laugh at anyone who dares to ask for a coin without earning it twice over. But sometimes, when fortune is in a playful mood, a generous drunk will toss you enough to buy a meal. Sometimes you make your way to the Pig's Ear, the kind of establishment that welcomes anyone as long as they can pay for their drinks and do not bleed too much on the floor. The windows are crusted with years of smoke, and the door hangs crooked on its hinges. Inside, the noise is immediate and overwhelming. Shouts, laughter, the crack of dice on wood, a few curses hurled your way before you even cross the threshold. You take up a spot in the corner, careful not to block the fire or the door. Hans strums the three remaining strings of his lute, coaxing out a tune so melancholy it might be mistaken for a funeral march. Bertolt juggles three bruised apples, his best trick, while Elspeth prepares to sing. You watch the faces in the crowd, looking for any hint of interest, any sign that your presence might be tolerated for the length of a song or a story. The performance begins. You play the fool, tumbling and capering, risking the slippery flagstones and the sharp elbows of the crowd. You know better than to pause for applause. The only reward here is survival. Some of the drinkers watch with grudging amusement. Others ignore you entirely, too intent on their arguments, their cups, or their cards. You keep moving, keep smiling, keep the patter going, lest someone decide you are more trouble than you are worth. There is always a revel troupe lurking somewhere, waiting to take your place or to jeer at your mistakes. Today, it is the Three Merry Toms, a trio of jugglers and mimes whose act consists mostly of mocking yours. They start in as soon as you finish your first act, mimicking your bows, pulling faces, making exaggerated gestures of hunger and mockery. The crowd, predictably, loves it. You grit your teeth and try to ignore them. The last thing you need is a brawl. Not here, not now, but pride is a stubborn thing. Hans shoots back a clever insult, and suddenly you are at the center of a new performance, a verbal duel that quickly devolves into shouted threats and a thrown mug of beer. The landlord's patience is thin, and the landlord's club is thick. He slams it down on the counter, sending a clear message: perform, do not fight, and above all, do not break anything that cannot be easily mended. You back down, grumbling, and try another routine. Elspeth sings a bawdy song that gets a few cheers. Bertolt manages to catch two apples in one hand, earning a coin from a half-asleep merchant in the corner. You try your best comic tale about the bishop and the miller's wife, and while most laugh, a few scowl. You will need to leave before the mood sours. The coins come slowly, dribbles and drops. Some are tossed in appreciation, some in annoyance, a few simply to get you to move along. The three merry toms encroach, circling your troop, eyeing your battered props. You keep your things close, remembering too well the times you have lost half your kit to quicker hands in darker corners. Soon enough, tempers fray. One of the toms bumps into Hans, accidentally knocking his lute to the ground and breaking another string. Hans swings at him, misses, and chaos erupts. Fists fly, mugs shatter, someone grabs a chair, and for a moment it is less a tavern and more a battlefield. You take a punch to the ribs, doubling over as the breath is knocked from you. Elspeth yanks you upright by your collar just as the landlord's club whistles past your head. You scramble for the door, your troop scattering into the night, bruised, battered, and poorer than when you entered. The toms are ejected as well, still jeering, their faces flushed with victory. On the street, you take stock. Hans is bleeding from his lip. Bertolt has lost his hat. Elspeth is swearing in a language you do not know, and your purse feels even lighter. You limp away, the city closing around you once more, its alleys slick and dark, its corners filled with hungry eyes and sharper knives. You know better than to linger near the tavern. There is always a risk that the fight will follow you, or that the guards, hearing of the brawl, will decide you are the villains, not the victims. The night is not yet over. You press on, scanning the street for another opportunity, a quieter inn, a merchant's feast, an open window through which laughter floats on a trail of candlelight and cooking smoke. Each is a chance, however slim, to earn a little more before exhaustion or violence or both send you home. You pass other actors, other beggars, faces you recognize from yesterday's performance or last week's jail cell. You nod, exchange a word, a warning, a grim joke about who will be arrested next or whose luck is about to run out. There is camaraderie here of a sort, but it is the camaraderie of survivors huddled at the edge of a storm, knowing the wind could change direction at any moment. Eventually, you find yourselves back at your original haunt, a little poorer, a little more bruised, a little more desperate than before. The coins you managed to collect are divided up, each person counting and recounting their share, knowing it will not be enough. It is never enough. You slump against the wall, bones aching, heart heavier than your empty purse. The city's lights flicker in the distance, promising warmth and comfort to someone, somewhere, but not to you. For you, there is only the next performance, the next scuffle, the next uncertain chance to scrape together enough to see another dawn. And so you rest, if rest can be found on cold cobblestones and with the taste of failure thick in your mouth. You wait, as always, for the next fight, the next insult, the next fleeting chance at survival. In this city, every day ends in bruises, and every night begins with hope, thin, worn, and battered, but still not entirely dead. When the city's heart rejects you, you are forced to its outermost veins, those muddy, half forgotten lanes where only the poorest dwell, and even the rats look down on the neighbors. Here, at the edge of the world and the town, the air smells less of ambition and more of cow. The ground squelches beneath your feet, a mixture of mud, manure, and broken dreams, as you and your troupe trudge toward your next audience. Out here, no one waits for entertainment. No one expects it. The people who scrape a living on the town's fringe have more important concerns. Milk to churn, goats to chase, debts to avoid. You pick a patch of ground near a crooked fence, watched over by a single scrawny cow and a cluster of barefoot children. They eye you with the same suspicion they might offer to a wandering wolf. There is no stage, not even a box to stand on, only a slick of mud and an ancient cartwheel half buried in the muck. You try to lay down your prop blanket, but it immediately surrenders to the filth, becoming just another piece of the landscape. The smell here is something you could almost taste, a blend of animal waste, sour milk, and hopelessness. Bertold coughs and mutters that this is where even the lice come to die. You attempt to assemble your troop. Hans is shivering, his clothes still damp from a puddle he fell into earlier. Elspeth clutches her shawl, glaring at the sky as though the gray clouds are a personal insult. You begin the act with little ceremony, launching straight into your most physical routine, anything to grab the attention of those few who have drifted close enough to watch. Your first audience consists of three children, a goat, and a toothless old woman who spits every few minutes, aiming expertly for the same patch of ground. You play the fool, slip in the mud, and land hard, earning a brief chuckle from one of the kids. It is not laughter, not really, but it is better than nothing. Hans attempts a tune on his battered lute, but the strings are so slack they produce a sound like a strangled cat. Even the cow seems unimpressed. The children are at least curious, their boredom so vast it cannot be filled by counting chickens or poking sticks at beetles. One of them throws a pebble, not in malice, just for the fun of seeing if you will dodge. You do not. The pebble strikes your leg and disappears into the mire. Elspeth begins a story, her voice carrying just enough strength to rise above the wind. She tells of a prince who outsmarts the devil with nothing but his wits and a stolen shoe. The irony is not lost on you. As the performance lumbers along, you catch the attention of a few more onlookers. An old man hobbling on a stick, a girl clutching a pot, a pair of teenage boys with hay in their hair. They stand at a distance, arms crossed, faces guarded. No one laughs openly, but you sense, perhaps, a flicker of gratitude. Entertainment is rare out here, and even the poorest hunger for a story now and then. When you reach for donations, the results are predictably meager. The old woman offers a knuckle of bone, sucked clean by her dog. The children toss you a few acorns. One of the teenagers shrugs and hands over the heel of a loaf so hard you could use it as a weapon. Bertolt bows, accepts these tributes with exaggerated grace, and you all pocket your earnings with as much dignity as you can muster. You move to your next routine, a mock duel between Hans and Bertolt, armed with sticks and insults. It is sloppy and half-hearted. Both are tired, and the mud saps whatever energy remains. Still, the children giggle when Hans loses his balance and flops into a puddle. Laughter is laughter, however fleeting. Beyond your little circle, life goes on. A woman yells at her son to get back to work. A pig escapes its pen and is chased, shrieking across the yard. You become background noise, another oddity in a world already full of them. Your voice grows hoarse, your limbs heavy, but you carry on, driven by stubbornness more than hope. There is a moment, a brief one, when you lock eyes with the old man. For an instant, something passes between you, an understanding of shared misery, a silent acknowledgement of survival against the odds. He nods once, almost respectfully, and you find yourself performing just a little better for the sake of that silent approval. As the performance winds down, The crowd disperses with the indifference of people who have too much to do and too little energy to spare. The children scamper off. The old woman spits one last time, and the cow lumbers away to a patch of slightly less terrible grass. You are left standing in the mud, filthy, exhausted, and no richer than before. You scrape what is left of your dignity off your shoes, gather your scattered props, and trudge back toward the city. The wind bites at your face, the sky threatens rain, and hunger gnaws at your belly. Bertolt tries to cheer you up with a joke, but no one laughs, not even him. You glance back once, hoping for a last look of gratitude or a wave. There is nothing but the empty field, the mud, and the distant shapes of people who have already forgotten you were there. The city, too, will soon forget. That, you realize, is the true nature of your craft. To be a momentary flicker in the endless darkness, a distraction barely noticed and even less remembered. Still, you walk on. There is no choice. The world does not wait for actors, nor does it care if they stumble and fall. You are only a shadow on the edge of the city, moving from one performance to the next, hoping for a day when the mud will be less deep, the hunger less sharp, and the laughter, however brief, just a little kinder. By the time the sun sinks low behind the city's crooked rooftops, the streets take on a different character. The bustle of market fades into a more desperate rhythm. Shadows lengthen, the cold grows sharper, and the cities forgotten begin to shuffle in search of shelter, scraps, or mercy. For actors like you, evening is not the end of labor, but the beginning of a new kind of work, the humiliating hunt for charity. You regroup near the square, muddy, tired, and defeated, watching the city's wealthier citizens scurry home, clutching their purses and averting their eyes. The city's patrons, the merchants, the tradesmen, the minor nobles, and their bored wives, move with practiced disdain, quick to ignore anyone who does not look, sound, or smell like a source of profit. You know their types by heart: the men with rings on their fingers, the women with tiny dogs and bored expressions, the apprentices with dreams that do not involve you. Your troop splits up, each drifting toward potential marks. The technique is simple, though success is rare. You approach with a practiced bow, offer a clever remark or a compliment, and wait to see whether pity, amusement, or annoyance wins the day. Hans targets a wealthy brewer, trailing behind him with a mournful tune and a hat in hand. The brewer pretends not to see, and Hans receives nothing but a sneer for his trouble. Elspeth fares a little better. She finds a group of servants unloading baskets from a cart. She compliments their skill, offers to sing a short song in exchange for a crust or a copper. The servants laugh at her wit, toss her a chunk of cheese already well on its way to becoming something else, and go back to their work. It is, by today's standards, a small triumph. You try your luck near the door of the Golden Goose, a tavern that caters to those with more money than kindness. You affect your best posture, greet a group of well-dressed clerks with a harmless joke about the weather, and hold out your hand, palm up. They glance at you, glance at each other. than at their own shoes. One mutters something about parasites. Another drops a half eaten apple in your hand and laughs when you thank him. Bertolt tries a different approach. He puts on his mask, crooked and battered though it is, and launches into a rapid fire tale about a miller's daughter, a pig, and a bishop. His voice carries just enough to turn a few heads. A small audience gathers, more for the novelty than any real interest. When he passes his hat, two children drop in a button and a tooth. A drunken clerk, perhaps remembering a better time, tosses a coin, a real one, not clipped, not counterfeit. For a moment, you all celebrate. One coin means a meal, or half of one. It is rare luck, and rare luck is not to be wasted. Luck, however, rarely lingers. The city's richer folk grow tired of you quickly, waving you away, muttering curses or ignoring you with the practiced indifference of people who have never had to beg for anything in their lives. The city watch passes by, eyeing you with open suspicion. You have learned the hard way not to be too persistent. The boundary between harmless beggar and public nuisance is thinner than your blanket. Sometimes, a few drinks loosen a patron's purse strings. On good nights, a merchant in his cups might call you over, demanding a bawdy joke or a song he remembers from childhood. He will laugh, slap you on the back hard enough to bruise, and toss you a coin before sending you on your way. The wives are less generous, but sometimes softer. Now and then, an old woman will press a dried flower into your hand, whispering a blessing you hope will stick. These small mercies keep you going. You pocket every gift, every crumb, every button, anything that might be traded, pawned, or eaten. You must also navigate danger. Begging on the wrong street or from the wrong person can mean more than just rejection. There are men who consider charity an invitation to violence, who see a poor actor as a target for their frustrations. You have been pushed, spat on, chased away with curses and threats. Bertolt was once beaten bloody for daring to ask the wrong man for alms. Elspeth has learned to avoid dark corners and leering smiles. Even a smile is a risk if offered to the wrong person. As the night deepens, your troop reassembles in a quiet alley to count your spoils. It is a pitiful pile: two small coins, a handful of buttons, half a loaf, a wedge of hard cheese, and an apple with more bruises than flesh. There is also the tooth, which Hans insists is a lucky charm, and everyone else agrees should be thrown into the nearest gutter. You share what you have. There is no sense in hoarding. Tonight's luck could be tomorrow's disaster, and no one survives alone. You each eat in silence, chewing slowly, savoring the taste of something not entirely rotten. There is a strange sort of comfort in this ritual, a reminder that, however hard the day has been, you still have each other. In a world where so many are alone, that is not nothing. Occasionally, fortune graces you with something more. Once, a traveling merchant's wife slipped you a silver coin and a whispered warning about her jealous husband. Another time, a wandering friar gave you a flask of wine and a sermon about the virtues of patience. But these moments are rare, and you learn not to count on them. Mostly, you make do with what little comes your way, grateful for every crumb, every coin, every ounce of luck. Night settles over the city, cold and absolute. You pull your rags tighter, huddle closer to your troop, and try not to think about tomorrow. There will be more begging, more humiliation, more careful calculation of how far you can push your luck before it pushes back. But for now, you chew your hard cheese, split your half loaf, and let yourself pretend, just for a moment, that you are not at the very bottom of the world. The stars above the city look the same as they do above the castle, and you take a bitter kind of comfort in knowing that, for tonight at least, you have survived. Night in the city does not bring peace, only a colder, sharper kind of hunger. The streets empty, the last market shouts fade, and those with homes shutter their doors against the darkness. For you and for the other performers, the end of the day means returning to your borrowed shelter. Tonight, a barn behind a cooper's workshop, where at least the roof mostly keeps out the rain. You shuffle inside, careful not to wake the sullen horse or the row of chickens who seem to view you as unwelcome guests. The smell is overpowering: old straw, manure, damp wood, and the faint, sweet rot of spilled cider long since drunk by better off men. But it is shelter. There are four of you tonight: Elspeth, Hans, Bertolt, and yourself. You each collapse into a patch of straw, pulling your rags tight around your shoulders, grateful for any corner that feels less cold than the open street. The straw is never truly clean. Within minutes, you feel the first prickle, lice, ever loyal, burrow along your neck and scalp. You scratch without thinking. Everyone does. It is just another part of the routine, like hunger, like fatigue, like the ache in your back that no amount of rest will ever cure. Elspeth mutters a curse, drags her cloak tighter, and shoves her boots beneath her head. Hans kicks at a rat, sending it scurrying deeper into the shadows. There is little conversation. Words are precious, and energy is low. Bertolt rummages through his pockets, producing the evening's treasures: a crust of bread, a bent spoon, a length of twine. You each contribute what you can: half a wedge of hard cheese, a withered onion, a sliver of salted fish found by the docks. The meal is eaten in silence, broken only by the sounds of chewing and the far-off barking of dogs. Food, when shared, tastes almost good. The bread is stale enough to crack a tooth, but you soak it in a little water from your battered flask and pretend it is a feast. Elspeth closes her eyes as she chews, perhaps remembering some long ago meal, perhaps just trying to forget where she is. You would do the same, but your jaw aches too much from the cold. Soon comes the ritual of sleep, a performance as complicated as any you put on for a crowd. There is always an argument over the best spots. Near the door is coldest, but you are the first out if the owner comes to chase you off. By the wall is warmest, but the rats there are bold and bite toes without hesitation. Tonight, Luck puts you near the middle, pressed between Hans's knees and Bertolt's feet. You try not to think about the smell. You wrap yourself in your cloak, tucking your few possessions close to your chest. You have learned to sleep lightly, always half aware of the world around you. A sudden noise, hoofbeats, a cough, the scrape of a boot can mean trouble or it can mean nothing at all. Either way, you are ready to run if you must. You do not remember what it is like to sleep deeply. Above you, the wind rattles the loose boards of the roof. Rain starts to fall, steady and slow, finding every crack and dripping down onto your hair and cheeks. Bertold curses softly and rolls over. Elspeth mutters something about the gods and their sense of humor. Hans snores. You stare at the dark ceiling and wait for your eyes to grow heavy. Before sleep comes, there are small, whispered quarrels. Who stole whose blanket, whose turn it was to fetch water, why Bertold always gets the softest spot. None of these arguments matter, not really. They are just noise to fill the silence, a way to prove you are still alive and still care in some small way about something. Sometimes one of you dreams aloud of warm beds, hot food, real applause. Tonight, the dreams are quieter. No one wants to tempt fate by wishing too hard for what you cannot have. You talk about little things instead. A good joke told badly, a song half remembered, the color of the sky before the rain came. It is not much, but it is something. The lice crawl, the rats scurry, the cold settles deeper into your bones. You tuck your chin down and close your eyes, hoping for a few hours of peace before morning comes and the cycle begins again. You have learned that sleep is a kind of wealth, more precious than coins. On the best nights, it comes quickly, heavy, and dreamless. On the worst, you toss and turn, counting the minutes until dawn. Tonight is somewhere in between. Your body aches, your stomach grumbles, but exhaustion pulls you down. Outside, the city breathes its restless, indifferent breath. Inside, you huddle close to your fellow actors, a heap of rags and hope clinging together against the world's indifference. You do not know what tomorrow will bring. You do not want to know. It will be more of the same: mud, hunger, humiliation, the endless dance of pretending to be someone else. For now, there is only the barn, the straw, the itch of lice, and the simple miracle of surviving one more day. You fall asleep at last, clutching your cloak and your meager hopes. If you dream, you do not remember it. Morning will come soon enough, with all its familiar hardships. But tonight, for a few brief hours, you are safe, if not comfortable, and that is enough. You wake well before dawn, not because you want to, but because your body demands it. Sleep, never generous, is stolen from you by pain. A sharp twist in your ankle from yesterday's tumble, the dull throb of bruised ribs, the persistent itch of lice that never truly leave. You try to stretch, but your back protests, your shoulders ache, and your legs are cramped from too many nights curled up on too little straw. You swallow against a dry throat, cough, and wince as it tears at something sore inside your chest. Hans is already awake, scratching at a scab and muttering curses into the straw. You take stock, the way you do every morning. Elspeth is pale, her lips dry and cracked, dark circles etched beneath her eyes. Bertolt moves slowly, favoring his left leg, a souvenir from last winter's fall on the ice, never properly healed, now made worse by cold and damp. You do not remember the last time you felt truly healthy, but you remember the stories. Actors blessed with golden voices, dancers light as air, jugglers whose hands never shook. You are not those people. You are battered, limping, and broken in a dozen small ways. Illness is a constant companion. The city is a breeding ground for fevers and coughs, for rashes and aches, for boils that rise angry and hot from the skin, for cuts that refuse to close, for teeth that rot and fall out long before their time. There is a cough that will not go away, a sniffle that lingers through summer and returns with a vengeance each winter. You hear rumors of plagues, of sweats that come in the night and leave whole households cold by morning. But what you suffer is slower, duller, a grinding misery that saps your strength bit by bit. You know better than to trust the city's physicians. Their cures are for the wealthy, if they cure at all. You have met their kind, proud men with soft hands and sharp knives, eager to bleed a patient for a coin or two. You have seen what comes of their work, bandages stained with old blood, wounds festering, fever rising, prayers said for deliverance that never comes. Their medicines taste of iron and bitterness. Their words promise relief, but all you have ever gotten is a lighter purse and a heavier heart. Instead, you rely on the advice of those who live as you do, beggars, charlatans, wandering friars, and women who know more about roots and herbs than about scripture. There is a market for remedies, dandelion root for the stomach, willow bark for pain, garlic to ward off evil spirits and hungry bellies alike. Elspeth knows a dozen tricks to make a fever break, though she will admit that most of them work only for the mind. Hans insists that spider webs make the best bandages, while Bertolt swears by the power of raw onion tied to the sole of the foot. You try them all because you have no choice. When your joints swell, you rub them with fat and ash. When a tooth aches, you press a clove against the gum and pray the pain fades before the tooth crumbles away. For bruises, you use vinegar, if you have any. For cuts, the juice of whatever bitter plant you can find. The smell of garlic follows you everywhere, blending with sweat and mud and making you even less welcome in polite company. There are other cures, whispered about and rarely tried. Some say that if you bury a frog at midnight beneath the window of the person who cursed you, your pains will go away. Others swear by leeches, if you can catch them, if you dare. There are stories of healers who charge a single copper to lay their hands on your brow and mutter words in a forgotten language. Sometimes it works, and sometimes you wake up feeling worse than before. You remember the time Hans tried to fix his sprained wrist by drinking a bottle of miracle tonic bought from a man in a feathered hat? The result was spectacular and immediate. Hans was sick in the alley for hours, and his wrist was no better. Bertolt tried to make a poultice out of mashed bread and lamp oil. Elspeth has experimented with everything from boiled nettles to ground bones, always insisting that this time she has found the cure. She never has. There are good days and bad. Sometimes the pain recedes just enough for you to forget for an hour that you are falling apart. On those days, you move with something like grace, your voice strong, your feet steady. You almost believe you might go another year, another winter, without breaking for good. On the bad days, everything hurts. Your skin is hot, your head swims, and you wonder how much longer you can keep going. Injury is as constant as illness. You trip, you fall, you are knocked down by drunks or city guards or by the simple treachery of slick stones and rotten boards. Each performance is a new opportunity to collect bruises, cuts, twisted ankles, stubbed toes. You know how to set a finger broken in a brawl, how to wrap a rib tight so it does not crack with every breath. You know how to hide your pain when the show must go on, because it always must. Sometimes you talk about the famous deaths of actors, men who collapsed on stage, women who faded away in their sleep, legends whose last moments were spent in applause. You joke that at least they died doing what they loved. In truth, you fear a quieter end, alone, shivering in the straw, fevered and forgotten, with only lice and rats for company. You wonder if anyone would notice, but morning always comes, and you keep moving. You rub your aching joints, check your bruises, test your voice with a cough and a muttered curse. Elspeth swears at her reflection in a puddle, then ties a rag over her head and stands. Bertolt limps to the door, cursing the weather, the city, the world. Hans whistles, off key, but the sound is brave. You gather your things and step outside, pain and all, ready for another day's performance. Illness is a burden you all share, a silent script you follow day after day. You know there is no real cure, no miracle remedy waiting in the wings. There is only endurance and hope and the stubborn pride that keeps you going even when every step is a reminder of how much you have lost. And so you keep walking, limping, coughing, singing, and pretending you are still whole. Tomorrow you will try another cure, another prayer, another promise from another charlatan. Tonight you are simply alive, and for now, that is enough. You have spent enough time in this city to know your place in the eyes of its people, and it is nowhere near the top. Most days you are invisible. On the worst days, you are the only thing anyone sees, and not because they want to. There are few professions lower than that of an actor in the hierarchy of medieval life. Beggars at least inspire pity. Leapers are feared, but actors are a breed apart, strange and suspect, always on the edge of being run out of town. You notice it in the way people look at you, or more often, do not look at you. The merchant's wife who wrinkles her nose as you pass, clutching her basket a little tighter. The blacksmith who spits in your direction, just missing your boot. The baker's apprentice who mutters, "Devil's fool," as he shoves past. They do not see art or wit or the courage it takes to stand before a crowd. They see only rags, dirt, and something shameful, perhaps contagious. Children are less subtle. They follow you down the lanes, singing crude songs, mimicking your limping walk, daring each other to poke you with a stick. If you glare, they scatter, but only far enough to regroup and throw stones. You learned early on to ignore them. To react is to lose. Sometimes, even silence is an insult. You ask directions and are met with stony faces. You offer a joke to lighten the mood, and it lands like a dead fish. A matron in a heavy wimple calls for her husband, as if your presence alone is an accusation. You try not to take it personally. You fail. The root of this contempt is suspicion older than memory. Actors come and go, bringing laughter and trouble in equal measure. No one is quite sure where you came from or where you will go next. Rumors cling to your troupe. Thieves, witches, heretics, and whores. You are said to bring the plague, to carry news and lies from distant towns, to seduce the honest with your clever tongue and your painted face. Some say you cannot be trusted because you are always pretending to be someone else. And how could anyone know the truth behind the mask? Others believe actors are servants of the devil, calling down curses with every laugh they inspire. You have seen the way the priest glares when you pass the church, as though a glance might summon fire from heaven. There are moments when the hatred turns to action. You have been chased from the market by a mob convinced your jokes were blasphemy. Elspeth was once accused of witchcraft for curing a cough with herbs. Only luck and the distraction of a public hanging saved her. Hans was beaten by a group of apprentices who claimed he had bewitched their bread to turn stale. Bertold was pelted with rotten eggs and told never to come back. He went anyway, because where else could he go? Yet, contempt is not always active. More often, it is passive, a wall of indifference that lets you starve within sight of the city's abundance. You pass taverns where laughter and music spill from the doors, and you are not welcome inside unless you are working, and sometimes not even then. You see tables laden with bread and meat, and you know the scraps will feed the pigs before they ever reach your hands. Sometimes, rarely, pity flickers through the gloom. An old woman presses a crust of bread into your palm, muttering a blessing as she hobbles away. A young man, shy and awkward, slips you a copper, his eyes darting to be sure no one sees. A servant girl brings you water, not meeting your gaze, her kindness as fragile as a bird's wing. These gifts are not frequent, but you remember everyone. You tell yourself you do not need the approval of the town. You perform for the coins, for the chance to eat, for the stubborn pride of those who will not be silenced. But sometimes you wonder what it would be like to be welcomed, to be greeted as something other than a nuisance or a threat. You imagine applause that is not tinged with mockery, a smile that is not edged with suspicion. These are luxuries, and you know it. There are rumors of other towns where actors are honored, where the guild protects its own, and the city gates are open to troops with new stories. You doubt these tales, but you tell them to each other anyway, around the fire, as a way to soften the sharpness of daily rejection. You watch the townsfolk, measuring every look, every word. You are always on guard, ready to run, ready to apologize, ready to laugh at your own expense. You know that every performance is also a test, every joke a risk. The line between tolerated and condemned is thin and easily crossed. There are nights when the burden is heavier. Elspeth lies awake, staring at the rafters, her face tight with worry. Hans sighs, trying to recall a time when he was not hated by strangers. Bertolt drinks more than he should, chasing a numbness that never lasts. You listen to the city outside, the sounds of life you are not part of, and you feel the weight of your own otherness. Still, you rise each day, gather your props and your courage, and step into the streets that will never be yours. You perform, you bow, you endure the stares and the sneers, because what else is there? You live at the mercy of a crowd that might cheer you or chase you, that sees you as both entertainment and warning. And sometimes a hand reaches out, a crust is shared, a word of kindness is spoken. These moments do not change the world, but they remind you that even in a city of contempt, there can be glimpses of something better. You tuck them away, small treasures against the long winter of indifference and hope for another day. There are few certainties in your life as a medieval actor, but one of them is this: you are never far from the long, grasping arm of the law. Law in this city is not blind. It stares at you, unblinking, waiting for an excuse to make an example of your kind. For actors, the world is a tightrope stretched above a pit of accusations, some laughable, some lethal, all terrifying. You walk the city's streets under the weight of suspicion, every step shadowed by the threat of authority. The city watch is always present, always watching. You recognize their faces: the hard eyed captain who once broke Bertolt's nose for performing too loudly near the mayor's house, the young guards who laugh as they chase you from the square, the bored sergeant who likes to remind you that actors are one step above thieves, two steps below vermin. There is never a moment when you forget your precarious status. The list of crimes you can be accused of is as long as the city's main street. There are the obvious ones: theft, begging without permission, disturbing the peace, blasphemy. Then come the stranger charges: sedition, for a joke that pricks the pride of a minor noble; witchcraft, for a story that hints at forbidden knowledge; heresy, for mocking a priest in a moment of misplaced bravado. For women like Elspeth, the risk is doubled: too clever, too sharp, too independent, and suddenly the muttering of witch starts to swirl through the air. You know the signs. It starts with whispers: a pointed look from the market wives, a cold shoulder from the tavern keeper who once let you sleep in his shed. Then come the warnings, sometimes friendly, sometimes not. Best move along, or the watch is asking after you, or they're saying you've brought the plague with your jokes. By the time a city guard appears in front of you, hand on club or sword, it is already too late to talk your way out. You have been caught before. Everyone in your troop has. Sometimes it is just a fine, more than you can pay, less than they could take if they really tried. Other times it is a public humiliation, the stocks, the pillory, a beating in the market square while the crowd pretends not to watch. You have stood with your arms pinioned, fruit and filth hurled at your face, all for the crime of performing without the right bribe, or daring to make people laugh in a city that has forgotten how. The worst accusations are those you cannot disprove. Once, after a particularly successful performance, you found yourself dragged before the magistrate, accused of mocking holy matters. The complaint was vague, the evidence non existent, but that hardly mattered. You stood in a cold chamber, shaking as the magistrate droned on about respect and order. You apologized, humbled yourself, and prayed that the day's mood was not for blood. You got away with a warning and a threat. Elspeth was not so lucky last autumn, hauled before the same magistrate, forced to recite prayers and swear oaths while the town gossiped about her strange herbs and unnatural confidence. She left with her life and little else. Sometimes the charges are invented out of boredom or malice. An angry merchant claims you insulted his wife. A priest declares your latest play a work of the devil. A jealous rival hints that you know more about the city's secrets than you should. Each accusation is another stone added to the weight you carry, another reason to keep moving, to keep your head down, to bow lower and smile wider. Worst of all are the show trials, public punishments staged as warnings to others. You have seen men whipped until they could not stand, women shaved bald and paraded through the streets, children taken from their parents for crimes no one could name. The line between actor and criminal is thin, drawn not by what you do, but by who dislikes you most at any given moment. You are always one joke, one unlucky glance, one misjudged audience away from disaster. There are tricks to surviving. You learn which streets to avoid, which corners belong to which rivals, which guards can be bribed and which cannot. You keep your performances short, your jokes safe, your stories free of anything that might be misunderstood, or, more likely, understood too well. You never travel alone after dark. Never trust a crowd that grows too excited. Never let yourself believe you are safe. Still, mistakes happen. Last winter, Bertold was caught up in a roundup of vagrants after a riot. He spent a week in a stone cell, emerging half starved and silent, his spirits broken for months after. Hans was once accused of enticement, a word that means whatever the accuser wants it to mean. He escaped with only a beating, thanks to a sympathetic watchman who remembered a childhood song. Sometimes you are offered a choice: leave the city quietly or face the consequences. You have packed up in the dead of night more times than you can count, your meager belongings stuffed into sacks, leaving behind a town that will not remember you, but will always be glad you are gone. There is never justice, only the constant calculation of risk. You watch the city's respectable people go about their business, secure in their belief that order is for their benefit, law for their protection. You envy their certainty, their blindness to the ways in which the world turns on the whim of a single powerful man or the malice of a crowd. For you, every day is a gamble, every smile a test, every performance a wager that the laughter you provoke will not turn into anger. In the end, you survive not by trusting in law, but by trusting in luck, caution, and your own ability to disappear when needed. You cling to your stories, your masks, and your companions, hoping that tomorrow you will still be free, if not respected, at least not accused. As you curl up in your straw bed at night, you listen for footsteps outside, for the heavy knock that means the law has come calling. Some nights, sleep never comes. Some nights, you dream of freedom, of a city where laughter is not a crime and stories are not suspect. But every morning, you wake to the same uneasy peace and begin again, walking the thin line between delighting the crowd and provoking the law. It is rare for anything to disrupt the gray routine of your days, but when it happens, it is always louder, dirtier, and riskier than you remember. A festival day in the city is less a celebration than an eruption, a raucous chaos where everyone, high and low, is either trying to escape themselves or to forget you exist. The banners are tattered, the bunting damp, the streets strewn with sawdust and chicken feathers and spilled dreams. For a wandering actor, it is a day of opportunity and of peril. The city comes alive before dawn, with the rattle of carts and the sharp calls of traders marking out their corners. By the time you stumble from your shared barn, crowds are already thick in the square, faces flushed with anticipation and cheap wine. Children run wild. Grown men howl songs you suspect they learned from their grandfathers, and even the dogs seem a little less hungry than usual. You and your troop waste no time. Festival days are a chance to earn more coins than in a week of regular performances, if you are lucky, and if you are not trampled in the crush or thrown in the stocks for some joke that lands wrong. You pick a spot near the center, dodging a man hauling a barrel of pickled fish, and lay out your tattered props with something almost like hope. The festival brings every sort of spectator, wealthy merchants already swaying with drink, apprentices looking to impress sweethearts, thieves ready to slip a hand into any unattended pocket, and the city's restless poor, desperate for any excuse to forget their troubles. The city guard are everywhere, grim faced and bored, their clubs tapping out a rhythm that says, "Enjoy yourselves, but not too much." You begin your act with more energy than you feel, driven by the noise and the press of bodies. Hans juggles 3 wooden balls, then 4, then 3 again, as one is snatched by a passing child and never returned. Elspeth sings a song about a knight who loses his trousers in front of the queen, which draws laughter and a handful of coins from a group of tailors. Bertolt performs a mock sword fight with a broom, nearly losing an eye to an overexcited merchant's elbow. You slip in jokes about the mayor's baldness, always careful to glance around before saying anything too sharp. The crowd, for once, is with you, at least for a few minutes. Coins drop into your battered cup, more than you have seen in days. You taste the first real hope you have known in weeks, tinged with the sour breath of the festival's spilled ale and burning meat. But the festival is a double edged blade. The crowd is drunk, and with drink comes both generosity and violence. A well dressed woman throws you a silver, then immediately demands you insult her husband. A gang of apprentices tries to goad you into mocking the town priest. Someone throws a half eaten pie, not at you, but at a rival performer, but you catch the splatter all the same. Everything is a risk, and every joke has two possible outcomes: a laugh or a beating. Soon, the festival's mood shifts. The laughter grows sharper, the tempers shorter. The city guard march through, clearing the square with shouts and threats, looking for anyone who has had too much fun. Fights break out, quick, brutal, over nothing at all. You see a juggler you know thrown to the ground by three butchers. You see a pickpocket chased into an alley and hear the sounds of a beating that goes on too long. You and your troop keep moving, never staying in one place for more than a few minutes. It is a dance you have practiced for years, drifting with the current of the crowd, avoiding the worst of the drunks and the sharpest eyed guards, always watching for trouble. Elspeth's shawl is torn by a beggar. Hans nearly loses his lute to a thief. Bertolt's sleeve is stained with ale, thrown by a red faced merchant's wife. You pocket every coin you can, knowing this bounty will not last, and that by sunset, the city's generosity will have dried up like a spilled mug in the dust. Sometimes you are invited to perform in the courtyard of a wealthy house, usually by someone who wants to show off their power or to humiliate you for sport. You bow low, say whatever you must, and hope the payment is worth the bruised pride. Once, a drunken noble demanded you dance on a table for his friends. You did, and only twisted your ankle a little when you fell. The laughter followed you all the way to the street. The sun moves slowly overhead, the festival's energy rising and falling in waves. By late afternoon, the square is a battleground of empty cups, broken baskets, and trampled dreams. You are tired, thirsty, and more bruised than when you started, but your cup is heavy with coins, your stomach grumbling in anticipation of the meal you might finally afford. As dusk falls, the festival's darker side emerges. Fights turn ugly, and the city guard grow quick with their clubs. You see a pair of thieves dragged away, blood on their faces. You keep to the edges, avoiding eye contact, hoping no one remembers your jokes about the mayor's wig or the priest's red nose. There is always a risk that the wrong person heard too much, or that tomorrow you will be summoned before a magistrate to explain why the city is laughing at all the wrong people. You regroup with your companions in a quiet alley, dividing the day's spoils, a handful of coins each, and some scraps of festival bread, a piece of cheese, and the bruises that are your true inheritance. You count yourself lucky. No one was arrested, no one was badly hurt, and for one day, at least, you were not invisible. Still, as you watch the last of the festival goers stumble home, you cannot help but feel the familiar weight settle on your shoulders. The city is already returning to its old self, suspicious, gray, indifferent. Tomorrow, the crowds will vanish. The city watch will remember your face, and the same cold hunger will gnaw at your belly. But tonight, for a brief moment, you have coins in your hand, a full belly, and the memory of laughter, real, genuine laughter, ringing in your ears. It will have to last you until the next festival or the next miracle. You lie down in your corner, bruised but alive, listening to the fading echoes of the city's revels. The world is still hard, still cruel, still indifferent. But for one day, you are a part of it, not as a nuisance, but as a necessary madness. And that, in the life of a medieval actor, is as close to happiness as you can expect. Even in a world so harsh, you sometimes remember that you have a heart. Love is a luxury for the rich, a tangled mess for the poor, and a weapon for everyone in between. For a medieval actor, it is a thing half dreamed, half dreaded, as likely to leave you limping as laughing. You watch the respectable townsfolk and their families, wives at the baker's stall, husbands counting coppers at the market, children chasing geese through puddles, and you wonder what it might feel like to belong. But actors do not belong, not to anyone and not to each other, not really. Your family is your troupe, and your romances are as threadbare as your costumes. Sometimes, desire is nothing more than a stolen hour in a shadowy alley or the back room of a friendly inn. You take what comfort you can where you find it, a passing smile, a shared joke, a touch under a blanket when the night is cold. The city's lower ranks mingle freely, actors with beggars, servants, apprentices, and sometimes with those rare townsfolk who are curious enough to risk scandal for the thrill of something different. There are fleeting affairs, quick as rain on a summer day. Hans falls in and out of love with anyone who spares him a kind word. He writes songs for washerwomen, serenades girls who laugh and toss stones, and sometimes wakes in the morning to find his purse lighter and his heart heavier. Bertolt, older and more cautious, seeks out widows with strong arms and gentle hands. He says it is not love he wants, but warmth, and no one argues. Elspeth is another story. Men, and sometimes women, pursue her with the desperation of the lonely, the bored, and the reckless. She accepts their gifts, their flattery, their invitations. Sometimes she disappears for a night or two, returning with fresh bruises or a ribbon in her hair, her eyes hard and unreadable. No one asks where she has been, and she does not say. In the morning, she is just another hungry actor, and the cycle begins again. You have had your own share of foolish romance, a merchant's daughter who whispered poetry between the laundry lines, a widower's son who promised to take you away to the next town, a traveling peddler who left you with a string of beads and a case of lice. Each time you told yourself this one would be different. Each time it was not. There are betrayals, too. You see a lover's face at another actor's side, or hear a whispered promise repeated word for word to someone else. There are fights, shouted insults, the quick slap of anger, the longer ache of disappointment. You carry these wounds in silence, pressing them down beneath the daily struggle to eat and perform and survive. There is no time for heartbreak in a life measured in coppers and crusts. With love, as with everything else, there is risk, sometimes more than just heartbreak. There are illnesses you cannot name but cannot escape, a rash, a cough, a fever that lingers long after the affair has faded. You know friends who have wasted away, thin as ghosts, coughing blood into the straw and cursing the sweethearts who left them. There are tales of the burning, the French sickness, and other unnamed curses that follow careless passion through the city's narrow lanes. Yet, for all the danger, loneliness is worse. There are nights when you huddle in the straw, listening to the wind rattle the barn and ache for the touch of another. You remember a hand in yours, the soft warmth of shared breath, the laughter that made you forget, for a moment, how hungry and cold you were. These memories are as sharp as any knife. You know you will chase them again and again and again. Sometimes the only comfort is in your troop. You lean against Berthold's broad shoulder, share a joke with Hans, or let Elspeth braid your hair while she tells a story of a prince who fell in love with a ghost. It is not romance, but it is connection, and in a world so ready to forget you that counts for more than you ever imagined it could. There are rare moments of tenderness, a flower left on your blanket, a shared cup of weak wine, a song sung softly in the dark. These are gifts you treasure, though you never say so out loud. The world is too hard for sentiment. Love, like laughter, is a risk, a dangerous luxury, a fleeting warmth, a reminder that even fools and outcasts carry longing inside them. You tell yourself you do not need it. You survive without it. But on cold mornings, you remember the curve of a lover's back, the comfort of a shared secret, and you know you are lying to yourself. You are lonely. Everyone is lonely. Even the cruelest merchant, the coldest wife, the most arrogant magistrate feels it, whether they admit it or not. In the morning, love is a memory. You wash the perfume from your neck with rainwater, hide the last letter at the bottom of your pack, and go out to face the city's indifference. The show must go on, the coins must be earned, the food must be found. You carry your longing quietly, another secret weight among so many others, and you perform for the world as if your heart were whole. It is almost comical, the things you let yourself imagine when the hunger is a little less sharp and the bruises have faded from purple to yellow. You know it is foolish. You know that hope is a trickster's coin, bright on one side, worthless on the other. Still, as you stare at the cracked rafters of your borrowed shelter or at the cold sky before dawn, you slip into dreams that are as ridiculous as they are persistent. You imagine wealth first, not the kind of wealth that buys palaces or silk, but the simple riches of security, a roof that does not leak, a bed that does not crawl, shoes without holes, food that does not have to be bargained for or begged. Sometimes you picture a purse heavy enough that you could pay off the overseer for a whole month, or buy fresh bread every morning, or buy Hans a new lute string, and Bertolt a pair of boots without a single patch. In your dreams, you see yourself stepping onto the stage of a noble's great hall, light pouring down from torches as the audience leans forward, breathless for your next line. Your clothes are bright and clean, your mask flawless, your voice sure and clear. Elspeth is there beside you, radiant in borrowed finery. Hans's fingers fly across a real lute, and Bertolt's bow draws real, roaring applause. The noble laughs at your jokes, the ladies drop handkerchiefs and roses at your feet, and no one spits, jeers, or throws stones. The coins come thick and fast, and the only thing thrown from the crowd is praise. You imagine what it would be like to be recognized in the street, not as a fool, but as a wonder. Children running to greet you, tradesmen offering bread, even the city guard tipping their hats instead of their clubs. You would have a place in the guild, perhaps your name written down in neat letters, invitations to feast days and weddings in all the best corners of every square. No more bribes, no more hurried escapes into the alleys at dusk. Just laughter, food, and a soft bed at the end of every night. Sometimes the dreams go farther. You see yourself summoned to the castle where a bored prince seeks amusement. You and your troupe perform so well that the prince demands you stay, granting you a stipend and a room of your own. You are introduced as Master of Revels, your tales whispered through every corridor. Even the king himself applauds, and you dine on venison and fresh fruit, washed down with wine that never turns sour. You are, at last, safe and seen, but dreams are as fragile as the crust of your daily bread. The crack in the ceiling leaks, the cold seeps in, the rat in the corner reminds you that even in sleep, you are never truly alone. You wake and find yourself just as poor, just as cold, just as despised as the night before. You look at your companions and see the same longing in their faces, the way Elspeth lingers over a scrap of ribbon, the way Hans polishes his broken lute, the way Bertolt keeps his old, useless coin tucked against his heart. You all know the truth, but none of you say it aloud. The world does not change for dreamers. In the morning, you perform for the same indifferent crowds, trudge through the same mud, trade the same stale bread and cruel laughter for a handful of coins. Sometimes, after a rare good night, you buy a cup of strong ale and toast to your future fortunes, though you know they will not come. The next day always brings another insult, another empty belly, another reminder that in this city, actors are less than nothing. There is a certain darkness in dreams, a pain sharper than hunger. the knowledge that no matter how you hope, the world will not bend. For every tale you tell of a poor fool who becomes a prince, there are 100 truths where the fool dies penniless and forgotten. You know your odds. You have seen old actors in the alleys, their wits worn thin, begging for scraps and muttering the lines of plays no one remembers. You fear becoming one of them more than you fear the city watch or the sneers of the crowd. And yet, you keep dreaming. You cannot help it. Dreams are the last thing the world cannot take, the final costume you wear when all the others have been stripped away. They are what keep you going through cold, pain, and humiliation. They are the secret fire inside your chest when the city's contempt would otherwise freeze you solid. So you let yourself believe for a moment in miracles. You imagine the king in the crowd, a bag of gold at his feet, calling you forward to praise your wit. You imagine applause so thunderous that it shakes the city walls, coins raining from every window, the taste of roast goose and sweet cakes and hot wine on your tongue. You imagine, and then you laugh at yourself quietly because you know better, but you laugh all the same. The morning always comes. You pull on your patched shoes, gather your dirty props, and step back onto the cold, hard stones. Your dreams recede like mist in the sun, leaving only a faint aftertaste of sweetness, enough, perhaps, to survive another day. Dreams, you remind yourself, are the one luxury even the poorest fool can afford. You used to believe you would be different, that time would spare you, that your energy and stubbornness would keep you young, or at least relevant, forever. But age comes early to those who live on the edge, and you learn that in the world of the medieval actor, old age is less a season and more a sentence. The city has no patience for the slow, the stiff, or the tired. If you cannot leap, sing, or shout loud enough to drown out the misery, you are swept aside like yesterday's filth. You have seen it happen again and again. A cough that lingers too long, knees that fail on the cobbles, a mind that begins to wander, lines lost, jokes that fall flat. At first, your companions tease you. Grandfather, they say, though you are not yet 40. Careful, or you'll turn to dust before the next performance. You laugh with them, but it is a thin laughter. You have begun to feel the truth in your bones. You remember actors from your own youth, faces you admired and feared, men and women who seemed immortal in their rags and grease paint. Now you see them in doorways, hunched against the cold, their voices thin, their eyes foggy with hunger and disappointment. Some drift into begging, props traded for a wooden bowl, stories recited for scraps no one wants. Others simply disappear. Perhaps they find another town, perhaps not. No one asks because everyone knows the answer. If you are lucky, your decline is gradual. Your fingers grow stiff, so you pass your juggling act to Hans and take a role that requires only a shaking voice. Your memory falters, so Elspeth prompts you quietly from the wings, a look of pity in her eyes that stings more than any insult. You learn to move slowly, to take the blows and slapstick more carefully, to avoid crowds that could trample you for the sake of a better view. But luck is never permanent. One day, your knee gives out during a tumble, and you cannot get up as quickly as before. The crowd laughs louder, but the coins come slower. Your troop begins to speak of new partners, new blood. They do not say it out loud, but you see the calculation in their faces. How long can we keep carrying the weight of someone who can no longer pull their share? There is no retirement for actors like you, only the gradual narrowing of options. If you are clever, you find ways to remain useful, a story here, a trick there, or, if all else fails, your experience in evading the law and finding food in unlikely places. The young sometimes listen, but not always. They have their own battles, their own dreams, and no patience for tales of how things used to be worse, or better, or simply different. The worst fate is not hunger or cold, but abandonment. You have seen it too often. A troop packs up in the night, leaving behind the one who cannot keep pace. Perhaps they leave a crust of bread or a few coppers, perhaps not. In the morning, the old actor sits alone, waiting for faces that will never return, listening to the city's noise as if it might call their name. They become a cautionary tale, a shadow drifting through the marketplace, a warning for those who still have a little strength left. Yet, sometimes, there are small mercies, a rare friend who lingers longer, sharing a loaf or a story, bringing news from the troop that no longer needs you. The kindness of a stranger who remembers your jokes, your songs, the way you made them laugh before time caught up to you. These are gifts, as precious as any coin, and you hoard them in your memory, turning them over like relics on lonely nights. Occasionally, you see a truly old actor, someone who has survived not just the city, but the years. Their backs are bent, their faces mapped with wrinkles and scars, but their eyes are sharp. They move with the caution of hunted animals, but also with a dignity the young cannot fathom. When they speak, the city hushes. Even the city guard listen for a moment. You wonder if you will ever reach such a place, or if you will simply fade away before the city remembers your name. You think about the things you have lost, the strength in your hands, the lightness in your voice, the certainty that tomorrow will be easier than today. You think about the things you have gained, a kind of wisdom, hard and cold, that teaches you to value every meal, every coin, every moment of peace. You have learned that friendship is rare, loyalty rarer, and both are worth more than any applause. Sometimes, in the blue-gray hours before dawn, you gather with the other old ones, those few who remain, and share memories of better days. You tell the same stories over and over, not because you have forgotten, but because remembering is all you have left. You laugh softly at the foolishness of youth, the cruelty of the crowd, the endless hunger that never leaves you. If you are very lucky, you die surrounded by someone who cares, someone who will remember you not just as a fool or a beggar, but as a person who lived and struggled and brought a little light to the darkest corners of the city. More often, you slip away alone, your passing marked only by the empty space you leave in the straw. You tell yourself you are ready for it. You have seen worse. But as your hands grow colder, your voice weaker, you realize you are as afraid as you were on your very first day. You close your eyes and dream, not of fame, not of fortune, but of warmth, laughter, and the comfort of a friend's voice in the night. That, in the end, is all any actor can hope for. Dawn does not so much break as leak, pale and slow, into the corners of your shelter. The city outside is waking up, carts groaning over stones, the distant bark of dogs, a vendor's voice already hoarse. It is a morning like every other, gray, cold, heavy with the stink of yesterday's failures and today's hunger. You are awake before you open your eyes. The pain in your side is familiar, a bruise you have stopped keeping track of. Your blanket, such as it is, has migrated to the straw, where a mouse is busy exploring the crumbs of last night's bread. Hans is already snoring at your feet. Elspeth, somewhere to your left, coughs herself awake. Bertolt mumbles in his sleep, dreaming of something better than this. You roll to your back, stare up at the dark beams above, and count the days you have survived. Too many to remember, not enough to make any of them seem remarkable. You wonder, for the 100th time, if this is the morning something will change. Perhaps a wealthy patron will take a liking to your troupe. Perhaps the city's mood will soften. Perhaps the king will walk by and, by some miracle, laugh at your joke. The truth is, you already know what the day will bring. You will hunt for bread, for scraps, for coins dropped by accident or by rare kindness. You will bicker over who gets the less damp corner of the shelter. You will scratch at the lice, nurse the aches, ignore the hunger that knots your stomach into something hard and silent. You dress in the same patched rags, tie the same string around your mask, feel the same familiar weight of survival settle on your shoulders. Outside, the streets are already filling. The butchers set up their stalls. The bakers load carts with yesterday's bread. The city guard walk their beats with practiced indifference. To them, you are just another part of the scenery, one more ragged shadow in a city full of them. The morning routine is as bleak as ever. You and your companions gather what little you have, a handful of broken props, a flask with barely a mouthful of water, a piece of bread already going stale. You check the weather as if the sky cares. You argue about where to perform: Market Square, the docks, the tavern corner that sometimes brings in more coins, but always brings more trouble. No choice is good, but every choice must be made. You tell yourself today will be different. Maybe this will be the performance that changes everything, the joke that catches the right ear, the song that earns more than a crust, the act that wins you a place inside instead of outside. Hope is a small thing, but it clings to you, as stubborn as the hunger in your belly. You take your place on the stones. The city is slow to notice, as always. A few faces turn your way: a child tugging at a mother's sleeve, a merchant scowling as he counts his coins, a guard watching you with that mixture of boredom and suspicion that is his only real talent. You begin because you have to. You bow because the ritual matters, even when no one is looking. The performance is much the same as yesterday's. Laughter forced, applause rare, coins rarer. You juggle, you sing, you dance, you bow again. The crowd drifts away. The city does not change, but you keep at it. You keep moving, keep hoping, keep pretending that something new is just around the corner. Lunch is a heel of bread and a few sips of brackish water. Afternoon brings another round of performances, another round of jeers and indifference, another round of searching for a safe place to rest when the sun finally sets. Your troupe argues, laughs, aches, and endures. Sometimes, when the light is just right, you can almost convince yourself that this is enough, that surviving another day is itself a kind of miracle. Night comes again. The city grows quiet, and you return to your shelter, clutching whatever small victories you managed to steal from the day: a half decent meal, a coin that no one saw you pocket, the memory of a single, genuine laugh. You settle into the straw, scratch at the lice, and listen to the city breathe. You do not sleep easily, but you sleep. Tomorrow will come, and with it, another dawn, another day just like this one. The circle is complete, and you step onto it once more, weary but unbroken, hungry but alive. You do not expect a miracle, but you hope for one all the same. And so it goes. Cold floor, stale bread, jeers and laughter, mud and hunger, danger and shame, day after day. There is nothing glamorous here. No applause, no redemption, only the relentless persistence of those who refuse to disappear, even when the world wishes they would. Still, in the silent hours before dawn, you dream of a day when the cycle will finally break, when the world will remember that actors are people too. Until then, you survive again and again and again, because that, in the end, is the only story the city cannot silence.